McDonald's. Much better job.
I'm sure.
All right, I think that should have fixed it. Now I'm just gonna check on YouTube to make sure I'm live. Hopefully I'm live. All right. Nope. Should, all right. Right. Is it working? I don't know. Oh, there it goes. Showing up on Restream, then that should take a few seconds to show up on YouTube.
Nice.
Yes, I think we are live. I fixed the silliness. All right.
All right, awesome.
My text thingy. Where's my chat? I always ask the chat like if the sound is working because I've had a few that it wasn't. Is the sound working? Question mark. All right, I think it's working. Oh, there it goes. All right, we are live. Tom, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Tom Rudelius. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in theoretical physics at the University of California, Berkeley. More specifically, my research deals with string theory, cosmology, and quantum field theory. Some more fun facts about me. So I was primarily raised in Northern Virginia, but my family's from Minnesota. So as you can see from this glass here, I'm a big fan of Minnesota Twins baseball, Minnesota Vikings football.
My condolences.
And unrelatedly, Taylor Swift music. Tom, I think I saw that you're also from Minnesota, right? And are you there right now, actually?
Yep, unfortunately, with the snow everywhere.
Oh yeah, it's a lot nicer here.
I'm just bragging. He's making fun of me. Is that what this is?
I'm sorry.
So well,
actually, I want to say I saw that you were in Minnesota on one of your previous videos. I watched a few of them over the last few weeks, and I want to say I'm a really big fan. Like it's clear that you've done a lot of research and you have some really interesting insights.
Thank you.
So yeah, I was wondering if maybe before we get started, if I could just ask you like a few questions about like your experience, your story, how you got into this. If that would be all right with you.
Sure. My story, I was brought up in a very religious environment. My parents are both very religious. I went
what denomination? Sorry.
Protestant, I think. I don't really remember. I know I went to two Catholic schools. I went to a Catholic grade school and a Catholic high school, but we weren't Catholic. That was just the schools because they were good schools. Apparently, I didn't think they were good schools. I thought they were so annoying. But I imagine most kids agree that their school isn't a good school. But yeah, I had major depression my entire life. I've prayed every day for help. Nothing changed, and so I just eventually lost the ability to believe in an all-good, all-powerful being was there to actually care about me. And so I stopped believing late high school. Didn't have any interest in philosophy or the arguments or atheism. Didn't even know the word existed until several years later when I started to see debates and stuff on YouTube from Hitchens, Harris Dawkins, the new atheist guys. And that's when I started to get into philosophy and researching philosophy as one of the things I tried to try and overcome the depression also. And that's when I adopted the atheism labels, when I started to really research into the philosophy, like, oh, I kind of agree with these guys on pretty much everything. And during that process, I wrote my epistemology that I use to try and assess knowledge in the world and my morality. And I used those as the basis of my YouTube channel. So I was while learning, I invited out professors from local Christian colleges to say, hey, could we have a conversation about this topic? And a lot of them were gracious enough to be like, sure, let's go out to coffee for an hour and chat. Real detailed conversations, couldn't remember nearly all of it. So I recorded them, started to upload them on my YouTube channel and got a decent following doing that. And that was how I started my YouTube channel. And I've pretty much based it off of my approach to knowledge. And that is more or less my story.
Oh, cool. So next question I was wondering is what are some of your favorite videos that you've made? Like after people watch this one, which one should we all go watch next?
Well, I have a list of my favorite debates. It's one of my playlists. So they're pretty spread out. There are a bunch of different topics, usually ones that are not dumpster fires. Because, I mean, the ones that get the most views are always the dumpster fires. The ones that go the absolute worst are the ones that get the absolutely most views. So terrible, most money. It's Kim Kardashian theory of economics.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I have my conversation with Randall Rouser went pretty well. My conversation with Josh Rasmussen went really well. Luke Barnes, those are pretty fun.
Yeah, I watched the one with Luke. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that one was long.
He's a friend of mine. Yeah. I don't know him all that well, but I've met him a few times. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, he's a great guy. He was fun to talk to. We did like a 3 hour stream or something on a bunch of different topics.
Uh,
Um, Jeff Zwirink was a good one. Chris Gadsden was a good one. I don't remember all the fun ones. All the live debates I think were pretty good. The one with Ben Arbor and Stephen Worthy, and the most recent one with Samuel Nassan. Those were all good ones. So
cool. I think I saw that somewhere that you're working on a book. Is that right? If so, what's that on, and when can we expect that?
yeah, I'm working on 2 books. One of them has a publisher, one of them doesn't. One of them is my epistemology, just why atheists are right, the pseudoscience of religious apologetics. Got to be as controversial as possible for the title. That's how it sells. And
Sure.
the second book, which is the one I have the publisher for, is The Good Fight. An atheist and theist discuss which model just better describes morality, something like that. I can't remember the subtitle. And I'm co-authoring that with Samuel Nassan. He has a publisher lined up, so hopefully we're going to get that one done by the end of the year, this year.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah. A more personal question I was wondering. So like for me, I know before I do events like this, I tend to get pretty nervous. Like I sometimes will like throw up. Not today so far, but I was wondering how does this affect your depression? Like, do these things, has it been a positive, a negative? Does it affect you at all doing these sorts of videos?
Not exactly. So my depression is there always, no matter what, pretty much. And the YouTube channel itself has given me a lot of hope to try and achieve my goals that actually could make me feel better. But other than that, the conversations themselves are more or less just a distraction, like video games or anime or whatever. Just it doesn't
Or chess,
really.
I guess, for you.
What?
Or chess for you, I guess.
Chess is terrible. I really need to stop playing chess. It's like I'm super competitive, and when I lose, it irritates me quite a bit. So I really need to stop playing chess, but I do that when I'm like, I have my phone and I'm not on the computer usually. It's all I can do because I can't like watch anime on my phone because it's terrible. But yeah, chess is more of an addiction than a fun thing. It's a negative addiction.
Okay. You mentioned like a little bit. I was wondering, what do you sort of see as your purpose in making these videos? Like, is it I think the world would be better without religion, and I want to like rid the world of that, or is it I just find this really interesting, I like talking about it? Like, where do you fall in this?
Well, it would be a combination of things. The first would be a source of income that doesn't involve any real work. That's the number one purpose. So
that's always nice.
The dumpster fires, I mean, I always got to keep making dumpster fires because it's my main source of income. But secondly, it would be to promote my epistemology and morality, to sell my books, hopefully to gain popularity. I'd love to be into politics, and I'd love to solve the objective morality question. That would be cool if I could do that. I'd like to be the Darwin of morality.
Sure. I'm sure you're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah, just moderate ambitions there. Not trying to don't aim too high.
Nothing big or anything. Yeah.
And then I'll become president after that. It's totally fine.
And that almost feels like a smaller thing.
Probably
a lot more people have been president than solved that.
That's true. That is very true. So yeah, my main purpose is mostly source of income. Second main purpose is promote my epistemology and morality, and those would probably be my top two. The learning process, like I have no desire to eliminate religion. I mean, that's literally my source of income, so that would be a bad thing if I eliminated religion. But yeah, just having interesting conversations mostly.
Okay, cool. Okay, okay, wait. A couple more questions. First of all, what do you mean when you say dumpster fire? Like what? I haven't watched any of those videos, but I'm a little bit worried about them
now. Screaming, yelling, screeching, constant interruptions, the most unproductive conversations you could imagine, kind of a thing.
Okay.
Swearing, cursing, the kinds that get demonetized.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, all the ones that I've seen where you have other like scholars on, you're always very respectful, I noticed. So hopefully that is true today as well.
Yeah, most of the dumpster fire ones are with people who are not very open to conversation. So
okay.
Like the Jay Dyer one is the worst, where anytime I talk, he just literally just starts talking over me, and that's the entire 2-hour conversation.
Oh no. Okay. Yeah.
So
okay, last two questions. First of all, is Jump your real last name?
Yep.
Okay. I was thinking it might be a little like, since we're both named Tom, like it might be confusing. Like maybe you should call me T Rude and I should call you TJump or something. I don't know.
That'd be funny. Like I'm Tom 1, you're Tom 2. We just pick numbers. I'm Tom 3.1415.
Whoa! I'm Tom 1.
Fine. I'm Tom Pi. Tom 3.1415296535, something like that.
That sounds good. Okay. The other question is, where did you get that chair?
Lazy Boy.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
Lazy Boy official chair that I think they stopped making it now because I've recently looked to see if they're still making it. I've had two of them. The first one I had broke because I was very overweight in my past. So I got my second
Oh,
one, and this one's lasted me a while because I have lost quite a bit of weight.
oh, that's good. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. All right. I think I had my questions answered at least. Uh,
Cool.
so yeah, what do you want to talk about now?
Potatoes. Do you like potatoes? Potatoes are great, especially as French fries.
I'm a big fan, actually. I just had some for breakfast.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. I have coffee for breakfast. That's my breakfast. A
Uh,
nice 24 ounces of coffee.
yeah, I don't drink coffee actually. I've heard that one professor at the Institute for Advanced Study, where did my first postdoc, uh, once it was heard to have remarked that if you don't drink coffee, then you're not really a physicist. So I guess I'm not really a physicist, but I still don't drink it.
Yep. Yeah, I can concur with that. Like, caffeine is life. So to get into the main topic, I am an atheist, by which I mean I believe that naturalism better explains everything about the universe. Could you tell me some of the reasons that you're a theist? And I'd like to tell you my thoughts on those positions and hear your thoughts on my thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let me start out, Tom, with a couple of caveats here. Okay, so the first one is like I'm just not a philosopher, right? Like I don't know all the philosophical jargon. I don't know like Kant said this versus Kierkegaard said this or anything like that. So I'm not about to make any sort of deductive proof for the existence of God. In fact, I really don't like the word proof. I don't like the word apologetic. I'm not about to make some sort of formal apologetic or anything like that. This is just how I see the big picture and why theism makes most sense to me. The second thing I want to say is that this is not historically like how I came to believe in God. So sort of opposite of you, I guess. I was raised in a very non-religious family growing up. Never went to church or anything like that. I came to believe in God and in Christianity more specifically my sophomore year of college. Before that, would have probably called myself an agnostic, but maybe even an atheist. So I'm happy to talk more about that if you'd like. But
Sure.
for now, maybe just to start the ball rolling, I can just share a little bit about what I currently believe.
Cool. Yeah, and just to
So,
be clear, like I usually my interest isn't converting people, so I don't like try to say, "Oh, so you believe because of the cosmological argument." And when I debunk that, then you must convert to atheism, kind of thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
I don't care. It's mostly about analyzing the philosophical arguments and seeing do they actually follow, are they actually evidence. It's not really about
yeah,
convincing people. It's more about the approach, the epistemology, study of knowledge behind it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question. You know, why I'm here, right? So anyway, okay. So here's how I see it. So for me, actually, the question that I'm most interested in isn't the question of does God exist. The thing I'm more interested in is knowing like what is this world or this thing, this universe that we just happen to find ourselves existing in. And I could imagine a few possible answers to that. So the first one I could imagine is, maybe it's just a thing, like it's just the universe is a brute fact. That's all there is to it. And don't ask any more questions. And while I think this has some appeal, the issue with it to me is that it really just doesn't explain any of the features of our universe. And one feature, which in particular I think really cries out for an explanation, is the mathematical coherence of nature. That there are these laws of science which work and apply with regularity that I think about every day as a physicist. And so to me, actually, what I would believe if I were an atheist is that our world is in fact some sort of mathematical structure. That there are these laws that don't just describe reality but actually define reality. So that to me at least has the advantage of explaining one feature of our universe, namely its mathematical coherence. Already, I'd say that it's maybe starting to push us towards theism, because I think that the medium of mathematics is the mind, by which I mean that I believe, and I'm pretty sure you believe this too, Tom, from your previous discussions, that math doesn't exist in any sort of concrete sense. Like the number 2 doesn't exist in the same way that this like pillow does. I think that math exists only in the context of a mind, like your mind or my mind or God's mind. So to say that the world is a mathematical structure is maybe already pointing us in the direction of some sort of cosmic mathematician. But nonetheless, I still think that isn't the best we can do. I still think that there are a number of features of our universe which are left unexplained by just saying that we live in this mathematical structure. So what I actually believe, and what I think is the best explanation of our world, is that we live in some sort of cosmic narrative. or a story, if you will. And I think when you think about it from this perspective, so many features of our world sort of start falling into place. So just to name a few, there's this flow of time in our universe, which is really wild to me as a physicist, because in general relativity, we don't think of time as something that just flows past. And yet we undoubtedly experience it that way. There's this notion of causality, of cause and effect. Actions have consequences. There's the existence of conscious minds, which is really wild to me. But not only do conscious minds exist, we're not merely these isolated self-aware observers, what are sometimes called Boltzmann brains in certain contexts, but rather we are biologically evolved life forms who can interact with each other in meaningful ways, like characters in a story. We at least seem to have moral values and duties, and relatedly, we seem to have meaning and purpose. We're meant to do what is right and good, and we're meant to avoid what is evil and wrong. We have the ability to think rationally about our world, to do science, to ponder our cosmic origins, even to have discussions like this about the existence of God. We have feelings and emotions like love. We have this sense of beauty in the world around us. We have these desires, this longing for a better world. And to me, all of this is very remarkable if our world is nothing but a mathematical structure. So here is where I'll maybe mention fine-tuning is relevant. If you take the standard model of cosmology, the standard model of particle physics, you start tuning the parameters a little bit. You get a world which just doesn't have intelligent life at all. And I think that maybe a multiverse sort of could explain that. But A, a multiverse is really just a cartoon at this point. And B, I think that at best, a multiverse would really only explain one item on the list I just mentioned, namely the existence of conscious minds. Everything else is still a big surprise to me. So on the other hand, I think that all of this makes a lot of sense if our world is best viewed as some sort of story. To the point that I'd say this: if our world is somehow not a cosmic narrative, it was built in such a way as to fool us into thinking that it is. And I have trouble believing that. So finally, so how does God fit into all of this? I'll quote Chesterton here, who said, if there's a story, there must be a storyteller. And when I look at the mathematical coherence of nature, when I look at the beauty of nature, it seems to me that this storyteller is also in some sense a mathematician and an artist. And at this point, I'm saying, that this thing, whatever we want to call it, is starting to look an awful lot like some sort of divine mind, roughly analogous to a human mind, which can tell stories and solve equations and paint beautiful landscapes. So ultimately, we could ask this question: what is ultimate reality? What is the foundational thing? What some philosophers might call like the necessary or non-contingent thing. And I could imagine that it's a universe. I could imagine maybe that it's a mathematical structure. I could imagine that it's some sort of divine mind. And a priori, I think that this is speculative metaphysics. I don't really have a strong preference one way or the other. But when I actually do the experiment of looking at the world around us and seeing all of these features, to me, that's where the probability starts moving pretty strongly in the third direction, that we live in some sort of cosmic story told by some sort of cosmic storyteller. So that's roughly why I believe in God.
All right, cool. So there's a few things I wanted to bring up there. The first one was the nature could be a brute fact like the universe. You wouldn't consider God a brute fact. You consider him a necessary being, and those are two separate things, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Because I adopt something more like Graham Opie's position that there can be brute contingencies and brute necessities. They're both brute facts. So I would say that the universe could be a brute necessity, just like God is a brute necessity. So what would be the difference, or why would one be more plausible than the other?
Yeah, so this is what I was saying is a priori, I could imagine both of those things, So I'm not leaning on the contingency argument to say that God must be the necessary thing. But I guess here's what I'd say, I could imagine that it's a universe. I could imagine that it's something else. If it's something else, what sort of properties, what would this thing have to be? Well, if it explains the universe, then it better be immaterial, right? Because it's not part of the universe. And it must somehow be capable of producing universes, right? Like those are the two things that if such a necessary thing exists and it's not the universe. And to me, like the best analogy that I can think of for such a thing is a mind, an immaterial thing which has the ability of producing thoughts. And so in this analogy, we can sort of view our world as a thought proceeding from this divine mind. To me, those are the best two options. And I agree, like I don't have a strong preference to either one until I actually do the experiment of looking at the features of the world. And that's where, to me, all these features point rather strongly in the latter direction.
Well, you said you're a physicist, right? You study physics?
That's right.
So, I mean, most of the models in physics, like string theory you mentioned, or multiverse, many worlds, all of those theories are physical theories, right? They're saying there's a physical thing there. I think the most common one is emergent space time right now, where space and time are emergent from some other physical thing of some kind that isn't a god. All of them entail some kind of a amplituhedron geometry, something or another. So, why would a mind or conception qualify as a non-physical thing when all of the minds we see seem to be perfectly physical? And why would that be a better explanation than the ones that the physicists use that say, well, these things seem to explain the emergence of space-time, the emergence of our universe? Because it's not like in physics, the universe refers to our specific thing, our specific space-time continuum, not all material things. And so the fact that our space-time continuum had a beginning doesn't mean that all material things, all physical things had a beginning. They could have, there is a spaceless, timeless something from which space-time emerged from, and that is still, as far as we know, a material physical thing. So it seems like your argument is predicated on the idea that the universe is all physical things. And since the word universe had a beginning in the Big Bang or something like that, then all physical things must have a beginning. But that seems to be not correct, because it seems even if our space-time continuum had a beginning, that doesn't mean all material things did. Most theories in physics seem to disagree with that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm not sure if I'm quite understanding you, but I think maybe the issue where I sort of disagree is that it feels like you're trying to sort of make me pick between either some sort of like religious theistic explanation or some sort of scientific one where the laws do this.
Oh,
So
well, not exactly. So, because you said a mind, whatever created the universe has to be immaterial. And you said a mind is something that you think is immaterial. And that's one possible explanation. But to me, it seems like that's because all the minds we know of seem to be brains, they seem to be material. And there are these other things in physics that came about from the emergent space-time hypothesis, which is still material. So they're saying that space and time, while it had a beginning, was caused by an actual material thing that we just don't know about yet. So it seems like those two premises in your argument, one that it has to be immaterial, I don't think that's necessarily true. That seems to go against physics. And two, that minds can be immaterial. I don't know if that really follows either.
okay, well, I mean, I feel like I feel like there's still sort of this maybe dichotomy. I mean, I as a physicist can believe that that there are these laws that explain the universe, right? And that given this particular set of laws, given this particular set of initial conditions, that we get a particular universe that looks like this. Now, the question though at hand to me is why these particular laws, why these particular equations as opposed to some other? And so that to me, right, is where the metaphysical explanation comes in. And as I say, a priori, I don't find theism especially compelling on this regard, in the sense that I'm not going to lean on this as the main source of my argument. I think that theism is one possibility, and there are other ones. But the thing that's hard for me to explain is why this such some sort of these sorts of laws just happen to produce worlds like ours. Of all the ways that the universe could be, that it just happens to have all of these properties that I just mentioned. And so to me, that's something that seems to point towards some larger explanation and suggest that these things might be clues as to whatever the ultimate reality of the universe actually is.
Yeah, that would lead to the fine tuning argument. And my question with the fine tuning argument, the one I asked Luke Barnes, but not as clearly as I have developed it to now, is that if we take all the possible ways the universe the fine tuning constants could have been, you can make a one-to-one correlation to types of God. So there is a God that would want a universe of nothing but black holes, or so you just increase the gravitational constant by a factor of 2 or whatever, and you get a world of nothing but black holes. And there could be one God to each possible variation of the universe. And so to have a God who has the properties to want to create a universe like ours seems equally as improbable as a universe simply just being a necessary thing that has the properties of ours. So it doesn't seem to solve any of the fine-tuning problems to assume that there is a God there. It seems to have the exact same problem, just an extra step. Pushes it back a step. Who fine-tuned the fine-tuner?
So I agree that that there are sort of assumptions to be made when it comes to theism as well. But my claim is that the assumptions are much smaller. So you talked about the fact that there's this one-to-one relationship, right? between possibilities here and possibilities here. And that may be true, but just because there's a one-to-one relationship, it doesn't mean that the probability distributions are equal. And this is my point here, is that to me, it's eminently reasonable. It seems highly probable that some sort of, that an omniscient, omnipotent God would choose to create a world that looks roughly like ours, that has these features that I mentioned, that looks roughly like a story, has, moral agents that have this experience of beauty, that has these rational laws. That's not something, I think Luke said it well, that's not something that I'm losing any sleep over. On the other hand, if our world, if whatever, there's this whatever sort of impersonal
quantum particle
thing, whatever you want to call this your alternative to God. If such a it's highly, it seems very strange to me that such a being or thing or whatever would prefer to create worlds like ours with all those properties that I just mentioned. So that's where I think that the data really starts pushing hard in the towards the theistic God.
Yeah, so that's the argument I'm addressing. I'm saying that why would you think that? Because it seems like to assume that there's a God who would want to create a world like this seems equally as improbable or equally as fine-tuned as a God who would not want a world like this, who would want just black holes or just unicorns or just hydrogen atoms or nothing. There could be a God who would want literally any possible combination of universes that is equivalent, like one-to-one, to all the possible universes that could just come about by random chance. So if you take all of the possible ways that the universe could have been, there could be a God who would want exactly that universe, which means the probability distributions do seem to be exactly the same. I don't see a reason to think that there is a God is more likely to prefer this kind of universe that we're in than one of those other alternatives that the universe could have been but didn't.
So the point here is that, I mean, to me, it seems eminently reasonable that a conscious mind would want to create a world with other conscious minds, right? And especially that, so if such a being has these properties of goodness or whatever, that morality, it seems very reasonable, would be a part of our world. I guess to me, it seems like now I want to understand why you think that it's unreasonable to think that such a God would want to create a world like this.
Well, it seems to me that you've taken a God and you've added in a property of goodness. And you said, if God has this motive, then God would more likely create a world that accomplishes that motive. But the motive part is the part that differentiates all the different gods. I could just say, maybe God would want black holes. God just really likes black holes. So I changed the motive from being morality to black hole creator, and he would be creating each of the different black hole universes. Or I could say, God has the property of unicorn creator. He just creates a universe of nothing but unicorns. So the probability distribution is based off of that motive thing. So we grant there's a God, and then each different God has a different motive. So you've assumed one kind of motive, and you're saying, if this motive that I've assumed is correct, then that kind of God would make this universe more likely. But I can flip the argument and do the same thing. I could say there's a certain kind of quantum law or super law that we haven't discovered yet, which entangles all of the other physical laws. And so the probability of this universe coming about is essentially 1, because if you change any law, it's kind of like changing the weak and electromagnetic force. They're intertwined. So you change one, you change the other exactly proportionally. They are all of the constants of the universe are intertwined. Change one, you change the rest of them. So this universe is a necessary outcome because this quantum particle, as Graham Opie puts it, as the alternate necessary thing to a God, is determined by this law in its nature, which is it's like the analogy to the God's motive. And that makes this universe more likely under a naturalistic hypothesis. So it says, if I assume there is a naturalistic hypothesis that has this particular motive alternative, then our universe is more likely. So it takes the probability distribution, and instead of it making it completely random, it says that this particular one is more likely than the other ones. But the problem, of course, is, well, why would I think it has that particular kind of law that intertwines all of the other laws? It doesn't make any sense. But the same thing goes to a God. Why do I think God has this particular motive as opposed to any of the infinitely other possible motives? It seems like they both run into the same probabilistic problem of just saying, I'm going to assume there is the necessary thing, and it has some determining motive or factor that makes this kind of universe more likely. And we could do that for both hypotheses, or we could take that away for both hypotheses. So I don't see the difference in the two hypotheses of why the God one would be more plausible or more reasonable or more probable than the natural one, because it seems I can make a one-to-one on both sides of the having a reason or determining factor and or just complete randomness.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, to me, it seems eminently reasonable that a conscious mind, right, would choose to create a world with other conscious minds. This is something, even the Bible talks about humans being made in the image of God, right? It seems to me that we will look out at the world, we see all of these features which seem like the sorts of things that a conscious mind would create based on the limited experience that we have with conscious minds. I think that this is where the difference is with this sort of law, this hypothetical law that you're talking about that binds all these things together. So there's a couple things to note there. First of all, I think maybe this is clear to you, but I'm not sure if it's clear to all of our viewers, that the goal here isn't to try to find some laws that give rise to intelligent life, right? We have those. It's our universe. They exist. We exist. The question is why these laws as opposed to some others. So what you're suggesting, I think, is maybe there's some sort of like super law which somehow correlates all of these different things. And the problem with that is that it's not enough just for such a super law to exist. That super law also has to have the property that it would happen to create worlds like ours, that it would choose to create worlds with all of those features. And you can say, well, maybe that's just a property of this thing. But the point is that isn't something that follows immediately, or even I would say reasonably, from the idea of a super law in the first place. So it has to be added on as an additional hypothesis. And every time you start adding additional hypotheses, you're adding these additional parameters, which make it less and less probable. And in this case, I would say that it makes your super law start to look at more and more like the God of theism, which is a God who is, who I think very reasonably would choose to create worlds like ours with conscious minds, with beauty, with all of these various different properties. And so to me, it's almost like you sort of have to start just giving this God a different, this super law. You're just calling it by a different name. And my feeling is, if it looks like a duck, it swims like a duck. If it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck and not a unicorn in a duck costume. And to me, the idea of a super law, which just happens to look so much like the God of theism, feels like a unicorn in a God costume.
Well, it seems like begging the question. So you're assuming your hypothesis. So it seems like that if we look at all the laws of nature, no mind, as far as we know, created any of the laws of nature. All of those things are regularities in something that already exists, which is the universe itself. And so saying that there is something that determined these laws with a mind seems to break the inductive argument. The inductive argument is that all these laws seem to be a pattern in nature. So if there's a determining factor for them, it's probably a different pattern in something else, another natural thing. To say it's a mind doesn't seem to make sense, because minds can't create laws of any kind that are objective. They're all just arbitrary subjective laws that we make up. So to argue that there has to be some reason that the universe came about to be this way instead of another way, I could just say the same thing: is why did the God come about to be that way, to have a moral inclination to create conscious minds, and not another way? Because there are lots of people who don't like social interaction, who wouldn't create other people if they didn't have to, and would just live alone in the forest. So it's equally as conceivable to say that conscious minds could prioritize non-people based universes. And the only argument that seems to counter that is, well, most people like social interaction, which seems to be purely evolutionary. And so I don't see any inference you can make from a clearly evolutionary phenomenon of people liking social interaction to therefore an all-powerful being who didn't evolve would likely create human interaction. Unless you, of course, add in this objective moral principle. But if you add in the objective moral principle, I could just mirror that to this determining super law. So it seems like either way, there's going to be this brute fact of either the God is determined by his nature to create this kind of universe, or the quantum particle is determined by its nature to create this kind of universe. And given all of the evidence we have of the universe, it seems less plausible to say it's a mind, especially one that has the same proclivities of evolutionary-based minds, than it is to say it's a law that is just describing some natural feature that is mindless. It's just a unguided natural process.
So I think what feels like to me is the issue here is that you're correctly recognizing that that there's sort of two possibilities either way, right? Like on naturalism, it could be that the universe happens to have these properties, or it might not have these properties. And on theism, the same thing, right? It could have these properties, it might not. But just because both possibilities are on the table, it doesn't mean that they're equally likely, right? So if theory A predicts some phenomena will occur with 30% probability, and theory B predicts that that same phenomena will occur with 3% probability, if we see that phenomena, that favors theory A by a factor of 10 over theory B. Even though theory A wasn't, predicting that, so to speak, right? There are other possibilities you could imagine. It still wins in a Bayesian framework by a factor of 10. I think that that's what's going on here, is that I think it's very reasonable to think, right, that God would create such a world like ours. A conscious mind would create a world like ours. Is it 100%? No, but I think it's at least, like 50. I would bet on it.
Well, that's the part I'm asking about. So if we take 100 possible gods, assume there's only 100 possible logical possible gods, and there's only 100 possible logical possible universes, just for the sake of the argument.
Yeah.
You're saying that half of those gods would create conscious beings, whereas I'm saying one of those gods would create conscious beings. And I don't see how you're getting the probability that half of these possible gods would all be likely to create conscious beings. That would be like me saying half of the possible universes would all necessarily produce life. I know we can give a reason for that. We can say there's some property of gods. Gods have this conscious moral property that makes them want to create conscious beings. But I can do the same thing with the universes. I can say there is this super law that entangles all of the constants to make them bind together, and it exists in half of the possible universes. So you get the same probability of 50-50 either way, but it seems to be based on this assertion that God has this moral property in the God case, or the quantum particle has this intertwined property in the particle case. Neither of those seem to be more supported than another. They just seem to be assertions as far as I could tell. So if you want to say that the probabilities are the 50-50 in the God case, but the 1 out of 100 in the universe case, I could just say the same thing and say, no, it's actually 50-50 in the natural case, because I have this intuition that all universes have this intertwined super law, or the vast majority of them, and so it's 50-50 on the universe case. But I reject the intuition that God has this moral property in 50 cases, and so it's only a 1 in 100 probability in the God case. So what I don't see is, why is it more reasonable to believe that half of all gods would create a life-permitting universe versus half of all universes? Because those seem equally as reasonable to me. It seems like your argument is that because human minds have this intuitive desire to be around other social beings, therefore we could infer any conscious mind that created the universe would also have this desire. And I don't think that follows, because it's clearly just an evolutionary property.
Yeah. Okay. So let me say. Okay. There's a lot here, I guess. So first of all, you're right that it doesn't follow immediately, right, as some sort of deductive argument. But again, I think that the probability is there, and I think actually, I mean, to be honest, Tom, if I were an atheist too, I think I'd say, if what sort of worlds do I expect theism to create, like a God would create? I would. It's not unreasonable at all to me to say that such a God would create worlds that have the features I mentioned. I'm just repeating the same thing over and over again. But
my question is still why, because you keep saying that you have this intuition that a conscious mind would more likely create a universe with worlds, but why? What is the justification for that belief?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, let's just say, like, I mean, part of this might come down to our prior probability distributions. But let me say a little bit about evolution here. So to me, I think that, again, to point to say that this is just an evolutionary thing is again sort of creating this dichotomy where we view God as sort of this this alternative to science. And the more we learn about science, God is like a fugitive hiding out from the laws of nature. The more we learn about science, the less room there is for God. And we don't need God to explain these things. We have evolution. I think the issue with that, though, is that on theism, God is not like a fugitive from the laws of science. He's the legislator. And so, yes, evolution is something that will take place in a universe, given a very particular set of laws and a particular set of initial conditions. But the question is, why those laws and why those initial conditions? And to me, right, so if it's true, right, that our conscious minds, which work, I mean, clearly we are able to do like rather impressive things with our minds. We're able to make great progress in science and all of these things. If our minds, which are, lead us so reliably to truth in that area, it seems reasonable to me to think that our minds would be leading us to truth in other areas as well. And so it may be, it's a possibility, of course, that our minds are giving us, are biasing us very strongly to believe, that a God would create a world like this, when in fact, God is actually very different. That maybe God has different properties and he would prefer to create a different world. But to me, what's remarkable is that evolution, which has programmed our minds so well for truth in other areas, would sort of be misleading us so badly on these particular areas. Telling us that that morality exists, that beauty exists, that all of these things exist, telling us sort of what we might expect from a conscious mind. So to me, it's sort of the correlation between what we might, like what our conscious minds can do, things like telling stories, solving equations, painting landscapes, and what this world seems to be like, that to me points to some sort of mind roughly analogous to a human mind. So this is the point, Tom, I guess, as I could imagine, as I'm thinking about the probability distribution, about how might God be? Might sort of a divine mind be like? And my best guess, right, is that it would be roughly analogous to a human mind. This is my, I can't prove that. Again, it's not a deductive thing, but I'm betting heavily that the conscious mind behind all of this is pretty similar to the conscious minds that I'm familiar with. Until I see good reasons not to believe that, I'm going to bet on that. So the problem to me is that if without that sort of thing, without a conscious being, I see no reason why any sort of laws or super law, if such a thing is even coherent, would happen to create a world with the properties that I mentioned.
Okay, so it seems like the reason is because you're comparing God's mind to human minds. Now, you said you would believe that until you had a defeater for it. Now, I would say we have defeaters for that. Like, we can show definitively there are thousands of fallacies, biases, hallucinations, delusions, misconceptions that humans have all the time, and they have them in very specific contexts. So, for example, type 1 and type 2 fallacies. We see there's a rustle in the bushes. The monkeys that see, it's a lion, they just run away. They always run away because any rustle in the bushes, they impose agency on it and run away and survive. The monkeys who think, I'm going to be a little more skeptical, it's probably just the wind and I'm going to wait for better evidence, they get eaten more often than the monkeys who run away. So the monkeys who run away survive more. And so there is very good evidence that this evolutionary trait has been imparted in us that is false to impose agency on things, which is why we see monsters under the bed, why we have imaginary friends, why we see ghosts. All of these things that we know are a specific kind of natural phenomenon in the brain caused by evolution that we can literally activate by zapping the brain in the correct place or disabling the brain in the correct place. Like schizophrenics have this significantly more to a higher degree than normal people. This kind of comparison to agency, of seeing agency in things, is our hyperactive agency detection system, which seems definitively imparted to us by evolution, which I think does seem to count as a defeater for using that as a basis to infer anything about the ultimate creator of the universe. Or would that lower your probability as a defeater to some degree, at least?
Yeah, I would say that it would lower it to some degree, but it's still where I would bet, right? I mean, it's still the best bet I have is that an omnipotent mind is roughly analogous to a human mind, right? It's still the best bet I have. I totally agree that what you said, it does lower the probability, yes. But sorry, I just want to say, Tom, I feel like we're kind of running out of time. I have to go before long, and I feel like I've just been maybe living up to my family name and rudely going on here. So maybe I should let you live up to your family name and jump in and explain a little bit about why you don't believe in God. You sort of addressed my argument so far, but I want to hear what do you think is maybe the strongest argument against God, and maybe the Christian God in particular?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, my approach, like why I don't believe, is just because none of my prayers were answered. That's what caused me to stop believing. But the interesting question is, do the philosophical arguments work? And I think the philosophical arguments that are the strongest against God is like taking the same line we've been going down. It seems far more reasonable to me, using all the evidence we have of the world, to conclude that whatever the necessary cause of the universe is probably like the other more fundamental things in the universe. Like we see minds exist. Sure, I'm a mind, minds exist, but they exist in a very specific location in a very specific context. kind of like dark matter. Like you can see dark matter is over there in those very specific contexts, in those very specific locations. Now, if I was going to make an argument, well, I think dark matter is fundamental to everywhere in the universe. Every single electron has dark matter. It's only being instantiated in that one location for some reason. I mean, that's a very strange hypothesis. It makes far more rational sense to say, no, I think the dark matter is something that's actually in that location that we see the phenomenon occurring, and probably isn't in literally the fundamental stuff of the universe. It's probably just a specific kind of stuff in the universe. And I think the same thing applies to minds. We see minds in one very, very specific context in the universe, whereas we see things like gravity everywhere in the universe. So to think, well, what caused the universe? It's far more plausible to think it's like the gravity, or like matter, or like electrons, or like waves, than it is like minds, because it's far more prevalent everywhere in the universe. To think that the fundamental stuff of the universe is only instantiated in this one tiny little planet for some reason seems very implausible. And we can infer the same kind of argument to explain any question about the universe, like what caused the fine-tuning, what caused the cosmological argument, objective morality, whatever you want. You can take any single argument and apply that same rationale to it. It seems like the fundamental justification for theism is essentially the same kind of thing that you presented, which is that you're inferring that the thing that created the universe is like a human mind for some reason. And that seems to be, to me, a very bad argument. So I think that the more rational argument is the stuff that we find that's the closest to being the fundamental is more likely to be closer to what the fundamental thing is than the minds that we see. And so that would be my fundamental argument against theism in general. I would then go further to say that the Christian God, I think the problem of suffering, I take the logical problem of suffering. I think it completely disproves the possibility of the Christian God, because there is a thing that if the God was perfectly moral and all-powerful, then he would have done the thing to maximize morality. He would have done the most moral thing he could have possibly done, which means if I can list one thing that is a more moral outcome that the God did not do, then that either defeats the fact he's either all-powerful, so he couldn't do it because he lacks power, or he's all good, which means he didn't do it because he's not perfectly moral. And I can do that. It's my argument is that any of the possible benefits, to use Plantinga's free will defense, where he says that there may be some sufficient reason, without labeling it specifically, that could justify God allowing whatever evil, suffering, whatever, I can defeat that by saying whatever that reason could be, whatever the sufficient reason could be, we could make it more moral by making that sufficient reason optional. So whatever reason God may have, no matter what it is, we just take that one, make it optional by like saying, creating the person as a soul or whatever, and asking them, would you like to be a part of this world that has all of these things in it, the positive and negative, or would you like to opt out? Having that one addition to exactly this world we have would make it more moral, and it's clearly logically possible. And we as humans are pretty much going to be able to do it in the future with our technology anyway. So if God can't do it, then he's less powerful than humans, which seems incredibly implausible, or he's not perfectly moral, because if it's clearly a more moral situation based on my model of morality, that if God gave us the option to choose this world with all the positive benefits, his sufficient reason plus the suffering, versus opting out and going to a different world or one of our own design or of some kind, that would have made everything more moral, as far as I can tell. And if that's the case, then that would defeat the idea of an all-good, all-powerful God like the Abrahamic gods, or not the Muslim one, because they admit he's evil.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I'll leave the first part of what you said. I think that would kind of lead us back to where to covered ground. I can maybe talk a little bit about my take on the problem of evil and suffering. Though I think it maybe won't be so interesting to you given your moral system that you just laid out. But maybe I'll toss it out there and we'll and we can maybe talk about how it fits in with your morality. So first of all, I want to say, like, I think that this is the right question, against God. This is the question that we've all been asking, like, where is the God in the midst of all of this suffering and this death? And I mean, even if you look at the Bible, right, like page 2, people start asking this question, like, why is there so much suffering and evil in the world? And for a long time, Tom, like, I probably would have gone to something like the free will defense, which of course, I know everybody on this call right now knows, like, free will is a good thing. So God creates humans with free will, and that means we have the chance to do evil. And Therefore, there can be evil, and there is evil. So I think that there's actually some validity to it, but I agree with you, Tom, that it ultimately, like, there's just some sorts of evil, some suffering in this world that is just like too big for me to justify that. So I think of maybe like a 6-year-old child is like raped and murdered by a serial killer, and I ask, like, is the free will of that serial killer worth more than like the life of that child? And you're nodding. Like, I have a lot of trouble believing that. You have a lot of trouble believing that. Like that just doesn't seem right at all. So to me, I guess where I'm led is that if God is good in any sense, there must somehow be, like the story of that 6-year-old just can't end there. That somehow, and I would say this even for the whole human story, like all of us are like heading towards death. Sun's gonna swallow up the earth, and that's it. And I've got to, and I look at that and say, like, if God is good, there just has to be sort of like a better ending, a better trajectory for the human story. And as I think about the human story, right, this is my argument from the beginning, is I think the world is best seen as a story. I think that another thing that's missing from this whole story is a hero, right? Like a protagonist who's actually going to come and do the work of like defeating evil and suffering. And if I were in any other religious tradition, I would say that this is all just like wishful thinking, just hoping that God is like this and this will happen. But as a Christian, I point to Jesus and I say I think Jesus really is the hero of the human story. Like, Jesus comes and he heals the unhealable, he loves the unlovable, he forgives the unforgivable. Jesus is not corrupted by evil, but in the climactic moment of the human story, he overcomes evil, suffering, injustice, even death itself, with his death and resurrection. And so to me, actually, this I would say is like the most profound response to the problem of evil and suffering, which is not just some sort of philosophy textbook, not like the free will defense, sorry, Alvin Plantinga, but like a God who actually comes and suffers with us, and ultimately who promises us that someday all things will be made new, like that all the sad things will come untrue, and the world will be even greater for having once been broken and lost. And I think that's the hope we have in Jesus' resurrection. So let me say, like, as I think, I've said, as I argued this whole time, I think the world is best seen as a story. And every story has evil. Every story has suffering, conflict. And oftentimes it's actually the greatest stories that have the most evil, the most suffering, the most conflict. Because the darker, like, the night is, the brighter the dawn is when the day finally comes. And so I think in Jesus, like, there is, yeah. Dark Knight quotes, yeah. So, like, in Jesus, I think there really is hope that the day is coming.
Well, so my position is even if I granted just everything you said there, then it seems like Jesus isn't the hero, he's the villain in that case. So, for example, if we see a doctor who, imagine someone got shot in the leg, and there's a doctor, and the doctor, in the 1800s, his best option is to cut the leg off. He's like, there's no antibacterials, the best I can do is cut your leg off to save your life. That's a moral doctor. He's a good doctor, he did the best that he could. But if we apply that same standard to today, and a doctor cuts your leg off instead of giving you an antibacterial, we're going to throw that guy in prison. He's a moral monster because there was a better option he could have done but didn't do. And so that's negligence. And so if there's a God who has a better option he couldn't do, even if he did try to save you by cutting your leg off, that's immoral. That's wrong. We should throw him in prison for that. So from my perspective, even if we grant the story narrative, the Jesus narrative, he's immoral because he didn't do that more moral thing that I listed before. It's like he could have given us the option. You could say, all right, I'm going to give you an option to go to this world that I've designed with all the positives and negatives, or you can opt out. Adding in that one additional feature makes the world more moral, kind of like the doctor giving someone an antibacterial instead of cutting their leg off. And so in the Jesus story, what God did is like cutting your leg off. It's immoral. It's bad. Even if there's an afterlife, even if there's more stuff to make up for it, it's still bad what he did. Like in the analogy, cutting someone's leg off, they're still going to live. So there's still more to their story. But it's still wrong to do it. So even granting everything you said, that doesn't alleviate God from the immorality of his actions and not doing the more moral thing. And because it is clearly possible, since we could do it, or we're going to be able to in the future, I think that does seem to address your position and the free will defense in one stroke.
Yeah, so I think Tom, maybe the issue I have is that it feels like you're leaning very heavily on your particular view and your particular assessment of what is better and what is more moral. And I think that, like, this is the kind of thing where I can understand how, as maybe like as intellectuals, sitting here in our armchairs and our couches, like we can very easily like try to say like, oh, I think God should have done it this way. Like, I think that this would be a better world, But what I would say is that what I've found in my own experience, and also with with people I know who have actually been experiencing suffering, is that this in many ways is sort of like the best. This is sort of what we really need, is like not some sort of like cheap philosophical answer, but just to know that God cares enough about suffering to enter into it and experience it himself, and that someday God is actually going to make things better. And here's what I'd say, Tom. It may be hard to see, right? It may be hard to see exactly how all this could be better, right? Like how it is that God's going to take all of this like bad stuff in the world and somehow make it good and make it better than just starting out that way. But I think that this is where, to me, like the Christian story is so compelling, in that if God can take like the greatest, or at least one of the great injustices and evils, which is the crucifixion of Jesus, and turn it into the greatest good, which is his resurrection, salvation offered to the world through him, then to me that gives me confidence in that he can somehow take the rest of it and make that right too. So this isn't, to I guess use philosophy terms, this isn't like a rebutting defeater where I explain what's wrong with your argument, but to me it's more of an undercutting defeater, where it takes away, it doesn't answer the problem of evil and suffering, but it takes the teeth out of it. And I think it really addresses us in our suffering better than anything else.
Well, I definitely like to have you back on to talk about that later, because from my perspective, we can just take everything God planned to do, add one thing, which is make it optional. Like every individual being gets to choose: do I want to be a part of this world God designed, or do I want to opt out? And that one addition, without having to appeal to my morality, I can appeal to everyone's. Anybody who just looks at the situation seems to come to the conclusion, yeah, the option is a better, more moral situation, and which uses the same kind of intuitive justifications you used prior to the justifying the fine-tuning conclusion about minds. Using those same kinds of intuitions, we can conclude, yeah, this seems to be a more moral option, and God didn't do it. And so it seems to kind of undercut your argument as far as I can tell. I don't see how yours addresses it, but I'd love to have you back on for that one in the future. Would you mind if I asked you a few? We got two super questions. Would you mind taking those real quick? All right. So Marty Mad Scientist asks, if the birth and death of the universe continues random process, does that then work against intentional design?
Sorry, what's the question?
If the universe like expands and contracts infinitely, cyclic universe model, would that then be contradictory to the intentional design hypothesis?
So first, I'd say no. First of all, I mean, you'll know, Tom, that I never made any sort of like cosmological arguments with respect to the Big Bang. That isn't, to me, a very key part in the argument that I developed. The question is, why these particular laws, and just saying like there's a beating or not. What I want to say though, what I want to add though, I think that the cyclic universe gets way more attention in like theological discussions than it actually merits as a scientific hypothesis. Here's how I would explain this. Okay, so in the Big Bang, right, you go back in time, everything contracts to a really small point, and at some point quantum gravity takes over, and we basically know nothing. And I would say this too, we shouldn't really be talking about like Stephen Hawking's no boundary proposal in these discussions too, also very speculative. We really just don't know what's going on. Now, to the cyclic universe, like imagine you got to a wall of ignorance, right? And you have no idea what's behind that wall. And you say, oh, I bet I know what's behind the wall. It's probably an exact copy of everything I just had behind me, right? That seems unreasonable, right? That's like a very specific thing to suppose that should happen on the other side of that wall. And to me, that's like what the cyclic universe is. It's not something that really has like a good, strong scientific justification. Overwhelmingly, and this isn't just my view as like a theist. This is just like what this is like. You can talk to many of my atheistic colleagues. Like we just don't really understand what's going on at the Big Bang because we just don't understand quantum gravity. So I think the cyclic model is an idea, sure, and it's an idea that's worth pursuing more. But it's nowhere near like on the level that I think it's really relevant for these sorts of discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. I would suggest checking out the Attitudes of Common Physics or whatever the paper is. I have it linked on my Discord. Yeah, it agrees. It's a very minority position. Last question. Do you have a better understanding after talking with Tom that we are looking for a way to differentiate imagination and reality in regards to the argument? So like the point is like what?
Wait, which Tom is this?
So about you. So he's asking you because my main argument in all my videos is give us a way to differentiate is this hypothesis imaginary or real? And so he's asking like, do you have a better understanding of that? That's the goal of my conversations, I guess.
Can you, Tom, explain, maybe clarify this question? Do you maybe understand it better than I do?
Yeah, so my main argument in all of my videos is we need some way to differentiate imagination from reality. Like I imagine a unicorn, but I don't see a unicorn. There's some difference between the stuff in my head and the stuff in the world. So for any hypothesis, we have to figure out, it starts as imaginary. It's obviously something in your head. You have a hypothesis, it's an idea. So
yeah.
Does that idea conform to something in reality independent of your imagination or not? And the method that you seem to be applying is that you're using your intuition or a part of your imagination to confirm that that is not an imaginary thing, which seems to lead to a slight bit of a contradiction.
Oh, well, I guess, I mean, to me, I guess, I mean, sort of like all of us in some sense, you know, when we're doing these sorts of discussions, when we're thinking about metaphysics, you know, we're imagining hypotheses. And I mean, to me, this is very much like anything in science. So, I mean, let's talk about like a multiverse, right? Like I think that there are legitimate objections to a multiverse, but one that doesn't make sense to me is to say that because these things are not observable, therefore they cannot be true, right? The question is whether we would expect to observe them or not. So that, like, there's an analogy that sometimes I've heard given of, like, if I tell you that there's an elephant in the backyard, and you go out and you look and you don't see an elephant, like you're pretty well justified in believing that there's no elephant. If I tell you that there's like a flea, like there are fleas out in the backyard, you go out and you look and you don't see any fleas, like you're not well justified. I think that here, this is the thing is you know, it would be unreasonable, I think, to expect that we could arrive at God through some sort of like seeing him. You know, that would work for leprechauns or the tooth fairy. But again, you know, God is not like a magical creature. This isn't like looking for leprechauns or the tooth fairy. This is like Harry Potter asking if there's a J.K. Rowling. And so I mean, the question of like, I don't know, bridging the gap between imagination or reality, to me, it just feels like the question of how do we test hypotheses if we can't actually see them directly. But there are many instances where I think that in the search for truth, the best path will lead us to things that we can't see directly, like string theory. We can't test and see strings directly, but I still think that it's still, you know, the search for a theory of quantum gravity has led us to this point. And so I would say that theism, that to me at least, belief in God is similar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So my distinction is that you just need any kind of evidence, which arguments could work too. So yeah, it was great having you on. I really appreciate you taking time to have a conversation, and I will let you go to your meeting because you got to run pretty soon, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, a lot of fun. Good talking. Nice to meet you, Tom.